Now, less than 48 hours after US struck Iran's nuclear sites with bunker buster bombs, Iran has launched a retaliation called Operation Bashar al-Fateh. Iran has targeted US base in the region. The attack has come as a response to American strikes in Iran. Iran missiles rained down on America's largest air base in West Asia, the Al Udeid Air Base, which is located just outside capital Doha. No casualties have been reported after completing the attack. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have said that at least 6 missiles had struck American base near Doha. In fact, before the confirmation on the number of missiles, Iran had issued a vaguely worded statement in which it said that the country fired as many missiles as US fired during the attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Iran has also targeted US airbase in Iraq. Iran had earlier said that attacks on its infrastructure will not go unavenged.
پیام اقدام قاطع فرزندان ملت در نیروهای مسلح برای کاخ سفید و متحدانش روشن و صریح است. جمهوری اسلامی ایران با اتکال به خداوند متعال، اتکا به مردم مؤمن و پرآوازه ایران اسلامی تحت هیچ شرایطی تعرض به تمامیت سرزمینی، حاکمیت و امنیت ملی خود را بی پاسخ نخواهد گذاشت.
Now, the statements of condemnation are poured in from several countries in West Asia, beginning with Qatar. The country slammed Iran's attack in Doha and says it reserves the right to respond after Iranian attack. Qatar also says that its air defenses intercepted a missile attack on US military base. Several countries have proceeded to shut their air base temporarily. Nations including Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia have shut their airspace indefinitely. The US, meanwhile, has been monitoring the situation closely. The US Defense Department has even confirmed that Iran fired multiple short and medium-range missiles at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, adding that officials are keeping a close eye on the developments in West Asia. And joining us live from Birmingham, UK is Scott Luca, a professor of international politics, Clinton Institute, University College in Dublin. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Scott, reading out that strong statement that's coming from Donald Trump, the last part, very significant. He says, "Congratulations, world. It's time for peace." How do you interpret Trump's remarks? Can we expect de-escalation here on?
I think there's a combination of both Iran's attack, which was a token attack. And the reason why it was a token attack is even though it was up to 14 missiles, they notified Qatar in advance, who notified the Americans. And then Trump makes the response thanking them for notifying the US in advance, while continuing to put out the unverified claim that Iran's nuclear program has been totally obliterated. By the way, it hasn't. But if Trump can try to sell that to his supporters, because he's facing domestic difficulties over the US escalation in the war, then yes, I think we have a space where the Gulf states in particular, but also the Europeans, can step in and encourage the US at least to halt its attacks on Iran, to ensure that Iran doesn't retaliate against the United States, and that we have a path back to negotiations. But you also mentioned the huge question right now, and that is, will the Netanyahu government agree to this? Israel carried out some of its largest attacks today on Tehran. They hit paramilitary headquarters, they hit the headquarters of the Revolutionary Guards, they hit other central Tehran facilities of the government. So does Israel think it has diminished Iran enough, or given that Iran still has nuclear capability, a nuclear program, and that the supreme leader is still in place,
yes,
does the Netanyahu government say no? Yeah.
Right, Mr. Scott rightly put a token attack and of course symbolic in many ways, given that it appears that same number of missiles were fired from the Iranian side as by the US, while it struck those nuclear sites in Iran. But reports suggest that President Donald Trump's West Asia envoy has been in constant touch with Iranian officials since US strikes on nuclear sites in Iran. Your assessment of the kind of contact that has happened since US carried out the airstrikes on Iran?
Well, throughout the Israeli attacks on Iran, let alone the U.S. strikes, Steve Witkoff, the real estate developer who is Trump's envoy, has been in contact with Iranian officials indirectly through intermediaries. So there's been a channel which has been open. Now that channel, of course, did not prevent the escalation that we saw on Saturday with the U.S. strikes. But again, it does mean that there wasn't a complete break in terms of the lines of communication. And what's interesting to watch is the Iranians here, because of course, when the Americans struck, the Iranian foreign minister, Mr. Araghchi, was in Turkey. Now, Turkey is a potential intermediary with the Americans. He then went to Moscow to talk to Vladimir Putin. I think the next 24 hours, what I'm watching for is this, that if Trump does not go chaotic, because he could swing and say something crazy within the next 24 hours, if he maintains this line, and if the Iranians maintain what is their implicit call for restraint, despite Ayatollah Khamenei putting out a picture of a U.S. flag and military installations burning just a few minutes ago. If they do that, we have the potential here that everybody steps back, but I still leave you with that open question. The Netanyahu government said they had to completely remove Iran's nuclear capability. They said they had to really punish the Iranian leadership. If they don't establish that to their own public, that doesn't look like a victory. So can they accept that?
Yes. Yes, and Mr. Scott, important that you mentioned that the next 48 hours, it's going to be extremely crucial, but we're also given to understand that Iran is now considering suspending its cooperation with International Atomic Energy Agency. That's the Speaker of Iran's parliament who's made that statement. Given that the radiation levels are still being monitored, how do you view this going forward? If this happens, Iran does consider, rather suspends its cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog.
I think this is noise right now. I mean, it is coming from the parliament speaker, and the Iranian parliament passed legislation that Iran should come out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But remember, this is not effective legislation until the Supreme National Security Council and the Supreme Leader approve it. So I think Iran is signaling, look, you keep up these attacks, we have no restrictions on developing our nuclear program, so we're going to withdraw from this. But if the attacks diminish, I think Iran stays in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and I think they maintain cooperation with the IAEA, because as you mentioned, you need the IAEA to verify that those Iranian facilities are not suffering from huge radiation leaks, and you need the IAEA to verify that Iran is not proceeding towards an atomic bomb. Because once Iran pursues an atomic bomb, there will be no restriction at all on the Israeli attacks, and probably on the American attacks.
Yes, Mr. Scott, just last question. Talking about the Strait of Hormuz, which is still a flashpoint, of course, is there still a possibility of Iran shutting down the strait?
I think the closure of the Strait of the Hormuz was the card that the Iranians were playing that was the real threat here. I mean, 20% of the world's oil and gas go through that strait. I think it would have been a desperate move because, again, if Iran tries to close the Strait of Hormuz, there would have been attacks on their military, on their navy, on all those boats trying to enforce the closure. But yes, that's the one thing that could really hurt the world economy quickly, jack up oil prices, hinder economies around the world. So again, if we have this de-escalation, Iran doesn't do this. If, however, Israel continues to press the attacks, I think Iran tells the Gulf states, and therefore the Americans, that it still will retain this option to close the straits.
Yes, Mr. Scott, Luca, appreciate you for your time. Thank you for joining us on WION.
Thanks to you and your viewers.